Last week, we reported that things had calmed down in the U.S. Israel-Iran war. And then immediately after our report, Iran struck a ship in the Strait of Hormuz with a drone. Then the U.S. sent jets to bomb various sites inside Iran. And then Iran attacked U.S. facilities in Bahrain and Kuwait with drones, all in one weekend. However, today, Donald Trump says everything is still moving along towards a peace treaty. What exactly is going on here? At the same time, Secretary of State Marco Rubio negotiated a separate peace treaty between Israel and Lebanon that undermined the entire peace process that Vice President J.D. Vance was working on with Iran, causing Iran's actions in Hormuz. And then there is word that the U.S. is instigating things between Syria and Hezbollah in Lebanon and between the Kurds in Iraq against Iran, and that the Saudis are moving militias against the Houthis in Yemen. Are you getting all of this? And besides a quagmire in the Middle East, the U.S. and world economy show significant signs of distress, while the political leadership required to deal with this in the U.S. is totally at war with each other. On the eve of America's 250th birthday celebration, it looks like we're caught up in the middle of a major clusterfuck. Greetings from Semillas, an independent, working-class think tank and action center. This is our weekly news and review broadcast for the week of June 29th through July 5th, 2026. And we are taking this 4th of July celebration as an opportunity to reflect and review our nation's most important challenges. War, a collapsing economy, and political chaos at home. That's what America faces on the 250th anniversary of having created the greatest empire, a democratic empire, but an empire nonetheless. And that has meant a nation at perpetual war since even before its founding. We don't want to dispute the incredible accomplishments and unparalleled standard of living for our citizenry that has been created, but Iran today is symptomatic of America's very underpinnings. And forget about the idea that we are there fighting for freedom and democracy, okay? So we're using this episode to review broader issues that help us understand why we are in Iran in the first place and how that impacts our economy today, and whether or not we have the will and leadership in place to make any positive changes. First of all, most Americans believe that the war in Iran has been a very bad idea. And if we just step back a little bit and review the two other major wars of the past 50 years, the Vietnam War in the 60s and 70s that killed nearly 3 million Vietnamese, and the war in Iraq from the 1990s to the 2000s that killed over 1 million people, both caused unparalleled massive destruction to those societies while also killing U.S. servicemen fighting there. And they were both completely needless. We can conclude that just like the war in Iran today, these wars were very bad ideas. It's important to note the history of this particular war in Iran because this war is really a product of 100 years of occupation over the Middle East. First by Britain and France right after World War I, and then superseded by the control of the United States from the 1950s onward, and then eventually using the state of Israel as a military proxy to further control and dominate the resources of the Middle East for the benefit of the U.S. empire. This 100-year occupation contradicts any Western claim of democracy, freedom, and liberty. There has been a vast denial of human rights, of the very right to peaceful coexistence for the people of the many nations in the Middle East. So today, when we try to decipher the intricacies of the Iran war, it's pretty simple. Violent military occupation of one people, of one nation, over another is just simply wrong. All the people in the world have a fundamental right to peaceful coexistence. And that has not been the case in the Middle East for the past 100 years. It needs to end, and we need to get out as soon as possible. And stop accepting excuses for this tragedy, because that's all there are, very bad excuses. Moving on to the economy, the News and Review has been consistently talking about the K-shaped economy, which is everywhere in the news today. A few people are becoming fabulously wealthy while 60% of the population cannot make ends meet. And one of the factors influencing the K-shaped economy is, we believe, the vast militarization of the U.S. economy. We spend nearly $1.5 trillion annually for wars and the cost of past wars. This is a permanent war economy, and it helps to finance economic development in the United States that actually makes society more unequal. Those were the warnings made by departing President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1959 about the perils of the military-industrial complex that have now come to pass. It also greatly contributes to the mass inflation that we are facing today in 2026. On Friday, the Department of Commerce published the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index for the year ending in May 2026, and it looks like it's taking off. This is a very bad sign for U.S. consumers since inflation above 2% per year is considered unhealthy, and it's now over 100% of this rate and climbing fast. The United States today faces stagflation, a stagnating economy where good jobs disappear and standards of living decline, while inflation has greatly increased the cost of living for everything, like interest rates for housing. The K-shaped economy increasingly is a testament to the 1% of the population gaining a lion's share of the spoils of society and 90% of the population facing increased uncertainty. The general feeling among economists today is that we are heading towards a potentially serious recession. Currently, only a few sectors of the economy are doing well, like AI data centers, the war industry, and healthcare. However, there is a foreboding. Over 63% of those surveyed in a recent YouGov national poll stated they felt America was headed on the wrong track. In order to counter the serious problems facing our nation, America is in a serious need of political leadership. However, when we look at the political landscape in America headed towards the midterm elections this November, there's a vast fragmentation of American leadership within each party today. Each party has formed its own circular firing squad. Each party is now seriously divided internally. The Republicans are splitting between the always Trump supporters, the American firsters who oppose military intervention, and the neocon Zionists, the war hawks, and pro-Israel factions. The Democrats have split between the radicals such as Bernie Sanders, Mondami, AOC, and the DSA on the one hand, on the other, the traditional government entitlements, government unions, welfare state faction, and then the neocon and Zionists. And remember that each party is financed by oligarchs, the Republicans by the very rich conservative members of the ruling class, and the Democrats by the very rich liberal members of the ruling class. In an upcoming book published by Professor Robert Pate of the University of Chicago entitled Our Own Worst Enemies, America in the Age of Violent Populism, Dr. Pate predicts that we are headed towards another U.S. civil war. This is our legacy in 2026. On this 250th anniversary of this nation's Declaration of Independence, Semillas, an independent working class think tank and action center, is asserting that a new movement for political independence is now required, coming from the 90% of the U.S. population that largely sits on the sidelines of American democracy, the American working class. We can all see that this nation stands at a crossroads. The American empire has greatly benefited all sectors of U.S. society in the past, from the very rich to the very poor. However, continuing on the current path simply is not working. The other path is rejuvenation of American civil society from the grassroots up that will end this nation's war economy and other needless spending and begin the path towards restructuring an economy based upon the path of peace and prosperity. Semillas' motto is Independiente. Our purpose is to help equip the great American working class with the tools, the capacity to make the changes necessary for us to live in peace and prosperity for the next 250 years. Please like, subscribe, contact us, and help sustain our efforts financially. And we wish you all a happy 250th Independence Day.
Semillas Community Center is a working-class think tank and action center. We have a plan, sowing the seeds of transformation.